We are back for part 3 of our tote bag sew along. So when we left out, we was getting ready to cut the pieces for our pocket. And unlike the bag and the lining where we needed 2 pieces, we're only gonna need 1 piece. So what I did was just use the remnant of my outer bag fabric, and I still have it folded in half. What I'm gonna do, just like we did both the outer bag and the lining, I'm gonna measure across 19 inches and mark. And then I want the length of the pocket to be 10 inches long. And we're gonna mark down 10 inches. Okay, we're gonna square it off. We're gonna cut around our square. And again, the top of my fabric was squared off, so that's why you don't see me cutting completely across 19 inches before I'm cutting down. Gonna cut across. Cut on the fold. And I'm just going to lay the top piece aside because we only need 1 piece for our pocket. So now we have a pocket that's going to measure 19 inches across and 10 inches down. Next, we're going to cut out the straps. We're going to cut out 2 straps 27 inches long. And if you already have your strap material, it should be 1 inch wide webbing. I got this from my local Joann, and I got about 3 yards because I was unsure of how long I wanted the straps to be. So I decided that we're going to have the straps to be 27 inches long each. So go ahead, measure out 27 inches. Go ahead and make it 30 inches. Okay, and just use that first strap as a template. Cut out your second piece. Put the remnant to the side. You may be able to use that for a second project. And now we're going to put our pieces together, and we're going to begin to sew our bag together. So we are almost ready to start sewing our back pieces together, but before we do that, we need to first turn under 1/4 of an inch hem along each long side of your pocket piece here. Once we turn under 1/4 of an inch hem, we're going to pin the pocket to the right side of one of your outer bag fabric pieces. We're going to edge stitch it to the bag along the created hems and then also to the sides using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead, take your pocket over to your ironing board and press under 1/4 of an inch along each long edge of your pocket piece. Creating a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance is something that I've gotten quite good at over the years of sewing, but if you need to, you can also use a seam gauge to help you mark what 1/4 of an inch hem would be. Because I am using an outdoor fabric, I am just going to mist it lightly with water that I have in the spray bottle, and then I'm going to take my iron and I'm going to let it sit for about 5 to 10 seconds to make sure that the hem is pressed in place. You're going to continue to turn under 1/4 of an inch hem along the top and bottom edge of your pocket. And remember, we are doing this to the long sides of your pocket pieces. So now that we've turned under and pressed over 1/4 of an inch along the long edges of our pocket piece, we're going to take our pocket piece over to our sewing machine and we're going to edge stitch one side down, which is going to be your top edge. And then we're going to come back, pin the pocket onto your front side of your outer bag fabric. Then we're going to edge stitch the bottom to secure it to the fabric. And then we're going to stitch the sides using 1/4 of an inch. Then we're going to lay the fabrics right side together, the front and the back piece, to begin to sew our bag together. So let's go ahead first and take our pocket piece over to our sewing machine. So I placed my fabric underneath my presser foot, and I placed it in such a way that the folded edge of the hem that I created is going to align with the inside groove of my presser foot. That is what I'm going to use as my guide to ensure that I have a nice straight line when I'm creating my edge stitching. And I'm only going to do this to one edge of my pocket piece for now. We are using a straight stitch, and the stitch length is still 3 millimeters. Remember to back stitch at the beginning and also back stitch at the end. Now, measuring from the bottom, about 6 inches from the bottom, you're going to place the bottom edge of your fabric, and that is this edge that you did not do edge stitching on. You're going to place that about 6 inches from the bottom. You're going to put that edge in place, and then you're going to pin along the short sides of your pocket, along both sides, and then also along the bottom edge of your pocket. So I've already begun stitching the bottom edge of my pocket to the front piece of my bag, and I am using the inside groove of my presser foot sort of as my guide to make sure that I'm hitting right at the bottom edge of the hem that we turned under. I did back stitch at the beginning, and I'm just going to continue to the bottom of the bag, and I'm going to remember to back stitch at the bottom of the pocket as well. Remember to remove your pins. You never want to sew over them. And just to give you a close-up of that inside groove that I was using, so right here where my pin is pointing, that's where I kept the right edge of my fabric right in line with that groove, and that allowed me to get as close to that folded edge of my hem that we created so that I can be sure that the bottom of my pocket is stitched down and attached to my bag. And now we're going to stitch the size of our pocket to our bag, and we're using the right edge of our presser foot as our seam allowance guide, which is going to be roughly 1/4 of an inch. And I position my fabric in such a way that when the needle strikes down, it's going to hit that top seam that we created when we edge stitch, that top edge. And then I'm going to back stitch, but I'm not going to back stitch past that seam line. I'm going to come down the remainder of my pocket to the end, and I'm going to stop right where that seam was created when I just edge stitched the bottom of the pocket to the bag. So go ahead and stitch the side of your pocket, and you're going to do the same thing to the other side. And again, we're using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, which roughly aligns with the right side of your presser foot. So I'm getting near the seam line at the bottom of my pocket. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to back stitch 2 times. Now I am stitching the other side of my pocket, and again I am starting on that seam line which corresponds to that bottom seam that we created on our pocket. I'm going to come forward a couple of stitches and then back stitch, making sure not to go over that seam line. I'm going to stitch all the way down, again stopping at the seam line that corresponds to the top of the pocket, and I'm going to back stitch at that portion as well. Now here's the fun part about your pocket, excuse me. You can leave your pocket just as one big open pocket, or you can actually create smaller pockets. And what you would do is just create a stitch line from the top of the pocket all the way to the bottom, and you can make your pockets as narrow as you would like, or you can make them as wide as you like. It is totally up to you. I am going to create 3 pockets, so I'm just going to divide this section evenly into thirds. So I'm just going to create a stitch line here, and then roughly a stitch line there, and then I will have 3 pockets corresponding to the front of my bag. And remember, no matter how many pockets you create, remember you want that needle to drop on the seam line that is there to indicate the top of your bag, and you want it to end on the seam line that indicates the bottom of your pocket. Excuse me, not the bag, but the pocket. So go ahead, go crazy. This is your bag. Create your pockets however you want to. Once you create your pockets, we're going to go back over to our cutting table, and we're going to start piecing this bag together in terms of putting the front and back pieces together of the outer bag and the front and back pieces together of the lining. So, did anyone else besides me have a great time in just not having to really pay attention to seam lines, making sure that things were measured out correctly when creating your pockets? So I have a stitch line here and I have a stitch line there. So I have 3 pockets, 1 pocket, 2 pockets, in my 3rd pocket. Now we have completed this section of our sew along. Our last and final section will be us pinning our front and back pieces together, as mentioned earlier, for the outer bag as well as for the lining, and also adding our straps. We're going to do one other technique that's called creating a gusset, and that's what's going to create that square bottom that you see on backs. So I'm looking forward to have you joining me for part 4 of the sew along, and we will be done with our bag.